Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist for Cooperative Farmers Elevator. And on this week's Field Friday segment, I thought we'd kind of touch on, okay, what's the next thing that's going to be going on here and what we're starting to see develop in the fields as of now. Here as we get into this first part of August, we're starting to see soybean aphids are finally starting to show up in some fields. We also have corn aphids out in the corn are starting to show up. Both in the last week, they've really started to develop. We've got planes in the area. You've probably seen planes around different areas. We're not really spraying for aphids yet. We're doing a lot of the fungicide work that we had kind of planned on for corn, and getting into the soybean fungicide timing. We're running pretty hard with that right now. But the aphids really been slow to show, but they're here now. We can find aphids in a lot of fields. Haven't really sprayed any that were a thick enough population to warrant that treatment threshold yet to dealing with them. And with corn's always difficult because there really isn't a threshold, but they do get into those plant canopies sometimes. They get thick enough where we know they're doing yield damage, so they are worth keeping an eye on here for a little while. Probably one of my concerns that's a little bit more increased this year is we've got a lot of stuff that was planted in different windows. We've got early planting, mid planting, and late planting, and that window is probably over a month. My concerns would be the fuller season hybrids on the corn aphids especially, or stuff that was planted towards the 1st of June. There was some of that out there in some areas. So later planted fields that are going to be tasseling later, pollinating later, they've got a lot longer to go before the aphids won't do damage, and they're showing up at the same calendar date for something that was planted April 24th as they are probably for something that's planted June 1st or May 25th, whatever. So obviously they have more time to do damage in those late planted cornfields. So they are something to be aware of. They have to be pretty thick probably to do damage, but we do have I've got some pictures here that we'll put on the screen. They show what some of this damage can do late season. You can see the remnants of it on this. This picture is the kind of the beginning phase of when they start to show up, which is what we're seeing now, little clusters. But when they get bad, you can see the damage they probably could do in certain conditions. So we need to be aware of what's going on out in these cornfields and be ready to act if need be. The soybean aphids, again, they're nothing new. They're starting to show up out in these soybean fields. We always have certain fields, a lot of times along river bottom somewhere where there's a lot of timber where they seem like they emanate from, and then they spread from there out in all directions. We're starting to see that happen. There's nothing out there that's been thick yet, but we've been able to find some movement and some populations starting to develop. Again, with both corn and soybean aphids, they prefer cooler temperatures. The forecast, going forward for this next week or so, kind of more normal temperatures, not overly hot. The temperature range of the soybean aphid for sure, they kind of approve more of that 70 to 80 degrees versus the 90 to 95 degree weather, which we've had some summers later on. But they expand in population much quicker if they're in the right temperature range. So that's why we've had it before where all of a sudden, they're kind of just there. They're all of a sudden getting pretty thick, and then if we get weather that we can't get spraying, they get ahead of us once in a while. It's been a few years since we've had that, but if the temperatures are right, they can expand in population rather rapidly. So we need to keep an eye on them for a while as well. We've probably got a month to go on some of these soybeans. Again, the same thing applies. We've got some later planted soybeans because of the weather, especially as we get into Osceola and Dickinson County, and maybe even some replants that were later. Those typically are magnets for those soybean aphids late season, so we can't just ignore those. So we need to be aware of those kinds of situations. The threshold, we've always talked about 250 per plant, and that on 80% of the plants or more is kind of the official threshold. Some of it's just by feel. Are they really getting bad, and what's the weather forecast? And the other thing is, we seem like they like to cause more damage when we're under some drought stress, a little short of moisture. Hard to believe, but we actually probably could use a little rain here on some of these fields, just because we haven't had a little shot on the topsoil for a while. With all the rain we had in June, we've been a little bit dry lately. So, maybe there is some chances here the next few days. We'll see if that materializes. But the other little comment that I would like to mention on the soybean aphids, We have had some resistance around the last few years to the pyrethroid class of insecticides. And there's a ton of those. They're the cheapest insecticides. There's a lot of generics around that get played with. We've cut rates on those in the past, and that usually doesn't help us any, but we've got documented cases in southwest Minnesota and northwest Iowa the last 3-4 years where the pyrethroids are not controlling the insects anymore, the aphids, and so then we're down to the organophosphates, the Lorsban type products. So a lot of what we probably work with and recommend more so are the combinations of both those together, kind of that dual mode of action. It's maybe going to be a couple dollars an acre more to do that, but we've already seen what happens when we get resistant to some of our main tools in water hemp and weeds in the fields, and we really have a lot less tools to work with in insecticides, so we can't burn those out any faster than we need to, because there aren't any new ones coming either. So just to make you aware that there is some strategy in what we're using for these products to take care of the aphids. So with that, be aware of what's going on in your fields. Let the CFE agronomist help you out, and if you have any questions, I'm sure they'd be more than willing to help you make some of those decisions and put some numbers to it. So that'll be this week, and we'll see you next week.